Welcome back, honors biology students, to the second lecture in the genetics series. I was on the wrong slide. Sorry about that. So we're going to continue talking about Mendel today and basically the conclusions that he drew from his research. So just as a reminder, Mendel worked with over 29,000 pea plants over the course of about 14 years. And he kept meticulous records on the research that he did with these pea plants. And from this research, he was able to draw two conclusions that he formed into two laws. So biology doesn't have a lot of laws, but Mendel came up with two of them. So the first one is the law of independent assortment of alleles. The bullet point below says traits are inherited as discrete units. Discrete units are talking about genes. The reason they're called discrete units is because they're found on one specific place in one location on a chromosome. So one trait equals one location on a chromosome, and it's always the same location. Between the different plants, they will have the gene for, say, flower color in the exact same location on their paired chromosomes. The law of independent assortment says that these traits are going to be sorted independently of one another. So it's saying the trait of height, of flower color, of the pea color, the pod color, those are all independent of one another. So you wouldn't have all purple pea plants be tall. Some are going to be short because the traits for height and for color are sorted independently of one another. So in humans, an example of this would be that hair color and eye color are not linked. Not all people with brown hair have brown eyes. Because these traits are inherited as discrete units, as genes, they are not linked. And someone who has brown hair could have blue eyes, they could have green eyes. And that's basically what the law of independent assortment says. The law of segregation is basically saying that you get half of your genetic information from your mom and half from your dad. So you get two copies of each gene and you get one from each parent because you have a copy. You have two of each gene. And you can see this visual over here is based on a pea plant. Sorry, this got a little messed up here. So it's purple and white pea plants. So you can see that you would get half. So you get one characteristic of the trait from your mom and one characteristic of the trait from your dad. You get one half of your genetic information from mom and one half from dad. The two copies separate during gamete formation. That is talking about meiosis and the formation of the sex cells. That's what gamete is referring to, which are the sperm and the egg. And we'll go into that more later. At this point, what you need to know is that you get half of your genetic information from one parent and half from the other. All right, so this slide has a lot of vocabulary on it. If you hadn't already noticed in this unit, there is a lot of vocabulary. I would highly suggest that you start making yourself note cards for this unit to make sure you stay on top of that vocabulary, or you could do Quizlet. So a gene is a piece of DNA that directs the cell to make a certain protein. So one section of our DNA is a gene, and that gene equals a specific protein. That process is called protein synthesis, and we have not gone into that yet, so don't worry about that right now, but you do need to know that one gene equals one specific protein. Basically, our genes are recipes, like a recipe book. You can think of our genetic code as a recipe book for proteins, which is crazy. But those proteins are what determine what characteristic or version of a trait that we have. So trait, an example of traits in humans would be height, our hair color, our eye color, our skin color. A characteristic or version of a trait would be like blonde hair, black hair, brown hair, red hair. Those are characteristics or versions of a specific trait. The trait is hair color. the characteristic is what color your hair is. So hopefully that makes sense. So the other thing that you need to know about this is it's also called an allele. I think that was on this last slide, this term allele. So we will go over that on the next slide, heterozygous allele. What does that mean? What does that mean? But an allele is basically the characteristic or version of a trait. So characteristic or version of a trait is also referred to as an allele. Each gene has a specific location or an address on a chromosome. That's what locus means. You can think of locus as its location on a chromosome. Each gene has a address, a specific address on a chromosome. So right here, this is the locus for flower color in pea plants. As it says allele for purple flowers. So locus for flower color gene. It says right there. Genes encode for proteins that produce a wide range of traits. So again, our genetic, our DNA, you could think of it like a recipe book for proteins. And then those proteins are actually what determine our traits. All of an organism's genetic material is called a genome. So that's a pretty straightforward definition. All of our genetic material all together is called genome. So you might have heard the term the Human Genome Project. That's when we mapped our entire genome. So all of our DNA in humans in the Human Genome Project was mapped. So genome is just referring to an organism's all of its genetic material, the sum of an organism's genetic material. And that could be not just humans, that can be plants or animals, anything that has genetic information. So this slide, this is actually where we're going to end. We're going to go over this slide, and this will be the last one in this lecture because it has a lot to unpack in it. So this image here, it's the same as we're showing here, these chromosomes. So we started here. These are an example of a pair of chromosomes. This is an example of a pair of chromosomes, and this is an example of a pair of chromosomes. Humans have 46 chromosomes, and we have 23 pairs. So we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Our chromosomes, a pair, is referred to as homologous. And we know that homo means same. We've had that prefix before. So that's just referring to the fact that they are the same, they're duplicates of each other. They're homologous chromosomes. They share the same gene locations. So this chromosome has, let's say this was for eye color. So this chromosome, these homologous chromosomes both carry an allele for eye color. So if your genotype is referring to what is in your genes. What is in your genes? So these letters that indicate dominant and recessive. So a capital letter indicates a dominant trait. And we saw that a little bit in that chart with Mendel's pea plants. Purple was the dominant trait over white. So actually, let's pretend this is purple, okay? So because this specific plant has a dominant allele for the purple color on both of its homologous chromosomes, this plant would be purple, and it's homozygous for the dominant allele. So again, homo means same, but this is referring to the two alleles, one that you got from your mom and one that you got from your dad. Okay, so that means you received the same. Homozygous means you got the same from both parents, and it's homozygous for the dominant allele. So if you have two capital letters, that means you're homozygous for the dominant allele. This genotype, so two lowercase letters, would be homozygous, so same. That means the letters are the same for a recessive allele because they're both lowercase. So somewhere, biologists got together, geneticists got together and decided capital letters referred to dominant traits, lowercase letters referred to recessive traits. Okay. And just a note, these are alleles for different things. So we said this could be the location of the trait for flower color. This right here would maybe be the trait for height. You could say plant height. And then let's say this is the location of the trait for the pod color. Okay. So if you have one dominant allele and one recessive allele, you would say you're heterozygous. Hetero means different, right? So if you have a uppercase letter and a lowercase letter, so one dominant and one recessive allele, you would be heterozygous for that allele, okay? We always write the dominant, so a capital letter first. If we do have a capital letter, that's always going to be first. That's just another rule of genetics that we follow. So just again to clarify, homologous and homozygous are very similar words. So just remember, homologous chromosomes is just referring to those paired chromosomes that each have the same traits located on them, whereas homozygous is referring to the actual versions of those traits. Okay, so homozygous and heterozygous are referring to the versions of the traits, whereas homologous chromosomes are referring to the pair of chromosomes. All right, so hopefully that was, you understood some of that. If you have any questions, feel free to use the discussion boards, and I will see you next time.